What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Boundless Perception YouTube channel. And today we're going to talk about, once again, large prints and some considerations when you're doing large prints. Specifically, if you should print them all as one piece or break them up into several pieces, and the pros and cons of doing both. So let's talk about it. Alright guys, so if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I really enjoy printing large items. Everything from masks here to lanterns to swords to, Buddhist staff from Record of Ragnarok. I really enjoy printing large props, but I've gotten a few questions about it, and over the years I've learned, a few things that hopefully will help you if you do in fact want to print large items. I've talked about this before, specifically with supporting them, but now there's a few other considerations that I would like to talk to you guys about if you do want to print them, because I've had several questions about it. As you guys know, the largest printer I have, which is in the background there, a CR10S5, it has a build volume of 500 by 500 by 500. And to give you an idea, that allows me to print a helmet such as this in one piece. I can literally just plop it down on the print bed, hit print, and it will, do its thing. Of course, once I've got all the settings right. But there's a reason I don't do that, and that's the very first thing I want to talk about, is if your large item has articulating parts, you probably do not want to print it as one piece. So specifically Foxy here has an articulating mouth. Her mouth, her, whatever, opens and closes like so. And if I printed this all as one piece, it would essentially weld together the top of the mouth and the bottom of the mouth. And also, if I printed this as one piece, the support on the inside of the mouth would go straight up to the top. It would go between the teeth here, and it would be very difficult for me to remove that filament. It would have a lot of extra work. I might snap it when I'm trying to get it off. And most importantly, the mouth would not articulate, because that is basically like a ball and socket joint where I stick the lower part of the mouth into the helmet. It fits together like so, and it allows it to rotate around. So that would not be a great idea, and that's also why I did not print this helmet as one piece, among many other that we will also discuss. But for the very first topic, the very first hint, tip, whatever you want to call it, if you're going to print a large piece, and just because you can, you need to consider if you have moving parts on it, and if you do, you probably should not print it all as one piece. So that's the very first part. The next thing that you want to consider when printing large props all as one piece is the final finishing product, the final finished product. So let's take Foxy here, for example, or we can even look at Thresh's lantern here. Thresh's lantern, again, will also fit on my CR10S5 as one piece. I could easily do that. But if I printed this all as one piece, the little orb inside here, I'll just pop this off, would not be able to move. I would not be able to fit a light under it. I would have a lot of problems, and it would be a lot harder to transport, a lot harder to do a lot of things. This would not be able to move freely. It would just cause a lot of problems. This product, I really didn't have to worry about finishing so much because it was just all in black, and I just painted it green for the lock and key. But moving back over to Foxy here, if this was printed all in one piece, I would have a lot more trouble finishing this, as when it comes to finishing, I was able to paint this part, the top pink here, separately, and I was able to paint the bottom half separate. So this piece is printed as, I forget exactly, but multiple pieces. I do remember that the top half here is separate from the jaw here, which is separate from the mouthpiece. So if I was able to remove this piece, all I had to do was tape off the eyebrows, and I was able to spray paint the entire thing white, tape off the ears, of course, and spray paint the entire thing white. I didn't have to worry about taping off the bottom, because of course, it was a whole separate piece. So there was nothing to worry about with any bleeding or anything like that. This piece, it wouldn't have necessarily mattered because the whole thing is white, but say this part wanted to be white, this part wanted to be red. I would have to tape off the entire bottom because I'm using spray paint, and to make sure that no red gets on the bottom. And that's kind of just a waste of of tape. And you're probably gonna end up having to go back over it. Whereas if they're separate pieces, it's much easier just to spray paint it, and you're not gonna have anything to worry about. also when it comes to sanding and when it comes to filling in seams. Again, Fun Time Foxy here, I wanted the crack to show, but if I was actually printing it all as one piece, the printer most likely would have put filament, support filament, in between all of the cracks here. One here, one here. You of course can go in manually and get rid of that, but since I printed it as separate pieces, I didn't have to worry about that. I discussed it a bit earlier too with the inside of the mouth. It would have just been a lot more work had I printed this all as one piece. This was already enough and I didn't want to add any more to my plate. So that's just something you really want to consider. Just because you can print it as one piece doesn't mean you should, because you're most likely going to up your post-processing work. Now, take that with a grain of salt, as there are some items that are better. For example, let's say Chica here. Chica, I did not split into multiple parts. The headpiece is just one part. And, oh, I'm sorry, rephrase that. I did split it into multiple parts, but the headpiece, I did not split into multiple parts. The entire headpiece is just one, so we had no trouble there, and it's actually stronger that way. So you kind of have to consider which thing you're printing, but overall in general, if you're, I guess say, if you want to print it as one piece, just make sure that it's much easier to finish at the end. It's all gonna probably be one color at the end, and that it's not gonna take a lot of work to actually, you know, finish it. And even more so, if it's going to be stabler, if that's the right word, sturdier as one piece, you may wanna do it that way. But overall, if you can break it up into multiple pieces, it's probably better to break it into multiple pieces. Take that with a grain of salt. So the third thing that you want to consider when printing large props such as these is errors. You're gonna have errors, I guarantee it. Foxy here, I think this was the third iteration of this helmet. Not in terms of me printing the entire thing, but I had to reprint a few parts 2 or 3 times. Whether it was due to scaling, whether it was due to warping, whether it was due to just like a jam on the printer, you know, things just happen sometimes. And if you're printing this all as one piece, say you get here and you know, you're 99% done, and then the top, you know, messes up. Now you have to go back and reprint the entire thing, or try to do some type of makeshift patch and figure out which layer actually messed up and just reprint that part. I personally cannot stand when I have an error, and I would rather just reprint the entire piece just to make it all right than try to do a patch job. So for me personally, I try to minimize the amount of print time, and that also minimizes the amount of errors that can occur. The top piece is maybe like a day, the jaw piece here was also maybe another day, and then each of these individually are maybe about half a day. So if any one of them messed up, I'd only be losing potentially a day to half a day. Compared to printing this thing all as one, I think as one, it was maybe like 9 days or something like that. You have to do a filament swap, you could get a layer shift, a lot of things can go wrong. So that's another reason that I really don't like to print large props like this all as one, despite the fact that I could do it. So moving on to the fourth reason that I really don't like to print large props as one piece, specifically when it pertains to masks, is because with masks, it's very hard to get them on when they're printed as one piece. So let's take, for example, any of the masks that you have here in the background, say Freddy, say Chica, say Bonnie, say Foxy here. All of the masks are able to fit on my head, but some of them are not able to fit on my head if they were printed in one piece. And that's because the opening at the bottom here is not always necessarily the same size as my head. Because if I scaled the prop to be the exact same size as my head, then that means the opening will be the same size as my head, which means at the bottom here, like, you know, like most humans, the bottom of our head is a bit smaller than the top here. So it's easier to get the piece onto the bottom of our head than it is to get the piece onto the top of my head. Hopefully that makes sense. I tried to describe that in the best way possible, but if I'm able to show you guys with, well, actually not with Bonnie here because I did fix that one, but Bonnie, the back of Bonnie's helmet comes off. You'll see this with lots of helmets. Specifically, a great example is the Blue Beetle helmet in my store. The back pops off, it's magnetic. You can, you know, slip it back on together with magnets. And the front goes on like so, and then the back comes in and it magnetically locks together. if you were to try to take that helmet and fit it straight onto your head, there's no way it would work. I tried it, it doesn't work, and that was one of my main learning points of not trying to print things as one piece. But when you separate it out, it's much easier. A lot of the helmets that we have in anime and, you know, cartoons and comics, whatever have you, are not really accurate, and they would not work in our world. So we have to find a way to modify them to actually get them to fit on us, or, you know, to whatever. Even, for example, the Chainsaw Man helmet that I just made, I had to try as much as I can to make the chainsaw as light as possible, because if it was the same weight as the rest of the helmet, it would be very top heavy and the helmet would keep falling over. So I had to make the front of it very light and the back of the helmet much more dense. Obviously, this would not work in real life, because if you had a real chainsaw and the front of it was, well, any part of it was actually much, you know, looser or not as dense as the rest, specifically the chainsaw blade, if the blade was not very tough and durable, it wouldn't work. So obviously, the Chainsaw Man helmet is more so for looks, but would never actually work in our world. So that's why you have to do a few modifications for it in order to get it to actually fit as a helmet. And that relates to most of the helmets that you print. You're probably not able to print them as one piece. You have to print them as two separate pieces to get it to fit over your head. Last but not least, our fifth topic, or fifth hint for printing large props or considerations, is that it's much easier to repair a large prop when it breaks down into sections. So let's say, for example, you know, Thresh's lantern here. Let's say this entire part broke. Well, I wouldn't have to reprint the base. I wouldn't have to reprint the orb in the middle. I would only have to reprint the top of this lantern. So let's say the same goes for Foxy here. If one of the ears broke, I can just pull out the studs from the ear and just place a new ear in there. Lower jaw breaks, reprint a new lower jaw. Whereas if the entire piece is one, it's gonna be much harder to repair that. It's not, you know, designed in such a way that it's just easily, you know, you're easily able to swap out pieces. The same goes for Freddy's helmet back here. His ears come off. If his hat was to break off, it's not all printed as one. It would just be the glue coming loose and maybe some of the filament, which I highly doubt since I didn't use JB Weld. But you'd be able to sand it down, slap a new helmet on there, and you're good to go. I have broken pieces where it's not just the top surface, it's, you know, cracked all the way through. You see the infill, you see all the layering going on, and that's rather difficult to repair. Whereas if it's just one piece that, you know, came out anyways, the piece came together, it's much easier to repair. I wish I still had Chainsaw Man's helmet here. I actually gave that to the client, but the entire front chainsaw comes out. So if you were to snap that walking through a door, drop it, whatever have you, you just have to reprint a new chainsaw, whereas you don't have to reprint a whole new helmet because it's not one piece. Hopefully that helps you guys, you know, decide if you actually want to print things as one piece or in multiple pieces. Again, I recommend printing them in multiple pieces, but it's always your choice. Hopefully those 5 tips helped you guys. I really wish I had knew some of these when I first started printing. I'm now and again up to 12 printers, and I've learned a lot on the way. And this has been something that definitely troubled me in the beginning, specifically with Yoko's rifle back there, or with Nidalee's spear. I printed a lot of those without, you know, a pipe in the middle. I printed them as too large of pieces that couldn't bear their own weight. And so trying to fix them is a lot more difficult because, again, they're not together in sections. And I can't just, you know, slice off the section that I glued together and, you know, slap on a new one. So that right there would have been something I definitely wish I would have known when I first started out on larger projects, but you know, you live and you learn, and hopefully these tips will help you guys so you won't make the same mistakes that I made. Hopefully you guys also liked this video, and if you did, I would greatly appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. As always, it helps the channel. And if you guys have any suggestions for videos or have any questions, feel free to ask me, and I would love to let you guys, you know my thoughts on it or make a video on it, hopefully helping you guys work out some of the issues you're having. That's going to do it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and as always, stay boundless. See you all. Bye-bye.